The massive Zephyrian war fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of Earth's solar system, like a storm cloud blocking out the sun. 10,000 ships of various sizes spread across space in perfect formation, their dark hulls gleaming with weapon ports and shield generators. At the center of this armada floated the command dreadnought Eternal Dominion, a ship so large it could swallow most moons. Admiral Vexitar stood on the bridge of his flagship, his forearms crossed, behind his back as he studied the primitive solar system before him. The Zephyrian was tall and lean, with gray skin that seemed to absorb light, and eyes like black glass that reflected nothing but cold calculation. He had conquered 17 star systems for the hegemony, enslaving billions and destroying any who dared resist. This backwater system would be his 18th victory. "Report," he commanded, his voice carrying the authority of absolute power. Commander Zithak, his second-in-command, consulted the tactical display with obvious disdain. "The third planet shows signs of industrial civilization, Admiral. Population, approximately 8 billion. No orbital defense platforms detected. No significant military fleet presence. Their most advanced vessels appear to be simple research craft and mining ships." Vextar's lipless mouth curved in what passed for a smile. Among his species. How disappointingly easy. I had hoped for at least some resistance to make this conquest memorable. The tactical officer interrupted with barely contained excitement. "Admiral, we're receiving a transmission from the humans. A single ship is approaching our perimeter." On the main screen, a small, battered-looking vessel appeared. It was clearly old, its hull patched in several places, moving slowly toward their massive fleet like a child's toy approaching a mountain. The sight drew derisive laughter from several bridge officers. "Put them through," Vextar ordered, settling into his command throne with amusement. The image that appeared on screen showed a middle-aged human woman in a simple blue uniform. Her hair was graying at the temples, and her face carried lines of weariness that spoke of long years bearing heavy responsibilities. Despite facing the most powerful invasion fleet the galaxy had ever assembled, she showed no fear. "I am Ambassador Sarah Chen of Earth," she began, her voice steady and clear. "I carry a message from the United Terran government to the Zephyrian hegemony." "Speak quickly, primitive," Vextar replied with mock patience. "I have a planet to conquer." Sarah Chen's expression did not change. "This is your only chance to leave peacefully. We have tried to avoid this outcome for decades. Turn back now, or face the consequences of violating the Sol Quarantine Protocol." The silence that followed lasted exactly 3 seconds before the Ray bridge erupted in laughter. Even Commander Zithak, normally stern and disciplined, could not suppress his amusement. "Did she just threaten us?" asked the weapons officer between chuckles. "Their entire planet couldn't scratch the paint on one of our destroyers." Vextar raised a hand for silence, though his own dark eyes gleamed with cruel humor. "Ambassador Chen, is it? Let me help you understand your situation. You face the combined might of 10,000 warships. Each one could turn your cities to glass within minutes. Your planet has no defenses, no allies, no hope. Yet you dare threaten me?" "I am delivering a warning, not a threat," Sarah replied calmly. "The Sol system has been under quarantine protocols for 50 years. Any hostile force that violates this quarantine will face immediate and overwhelming response." "From what army?" Vextar laughed. "Your mining ships, your research stations? Perhaps your moon colonies will throw rocks at us?" Sarah Chen took a deep breath. "Admiral, I have studied the Zephyrian military doctrine. You prefer to make examples of those who defy you. You believe fear is the most effective weapon. But fear works both ways. Consider this your final warning." Vexitar's amusement vanished, replaced by cold anger. "You dare lecture me on fear? Commander Zithak, target their ship. I want this insolent creature to watch her vessel burn before we glass her pathetic world." "Admiral," the communications officer interrupted, "they're broadcasting the entire conversation on all frequencies. Every ship in our fleet is receiving it, and it's being transmitted back toward their planet." "Let them," Vexitar snarled. "Let the entire galaxy watch what happens to those who defy the hegemony. The forward weapons of the Eternal Dominion charged with deadly light. Energy readings spiked across the tactical displays as enough firepower to destroy a city focused on the small human vessel." "Any last words, Ambassador?" Vexitar asked. Sarah Chen looked directly into the camera, and for just a moment, something flickered in her eyes. Not fear, but something that looked almost like pity. "May the universe have mercy on your souls, because we cannot." The flagship's main guns fired. The human ship vanished in a brilliant flash of energy, vaporized so completely that not even debris remained. Transmission ended, reported the communications officer. Vextar stood from his throne, addressing his bridge crew with renewed confidence. Record this moment. Let it be known throughout the galaxy that Admiral Vextar of the Eternal Dominion executed the last ambassador of Earth. Begin the invasion. I want their surrender within 6 hours. As the massive fleet began its advance toward the inner solar system, none of them noticed the nearly invisible network of quantum sensors that had been watching their every move since the moment they arrived. Hidden throughout the asteroid belt, disguised as ordinary rocks and ice, thousands of monitoring devices recorded every ship signature, every energy reading, every tactical formation. Deep beneath the surface of Earth's moon, in a facility that existed on no official records, an elderly man sat before a wall of displays showing the approaching alien fleet. Dr. Marcus Webb had been waiting for this day for 50 years. His hair was white now, his hands marked with age spots, but his mind remained sharp as a blade. Sarah did well, he murmured to the empty room. She gave them every chance. Around him, hidden systems that had slumbered for decades began awakening. Gravitational field generators buried in asteroids powered up with barely detectable energy. Signatures. Quantum field manipulators hidden throughout the solar system ran final diagnostic checks. The SolNet, humanity's greatest secret, prepared for activation. Dr. Webb opened a secure channel to command centers hidden on every planet and major moon in the solar system. This is control. The Zephyrians have rejected our final warning and executed our diplomatic team. All stations prepare for Protocol 7 implementation. The quarantine will be enforced. The alien fleet continued its advance, confident in their overwhelming superiority. They had faced desperate last stands before. They had heard empty threats from dying civilizations. They had crushed hope beneath the weight of their military might across dozens of worlds. But they had never encountered humanity. As Vextars, ships passed the orbit of Mars, entering the trap that had been 50 years in the making. The old man in the lunar facility spoke quietly to the displays showing the approaching fleet. You should have listened to Sarah, Dr. Webb said softly. Some warnings should be heeded. The Zephyrian fleet continued forward, unaware that they had just crossed the point of no return. 80 years earlier, humanity had made first contact with alien life in a way that would forever change their approach to the galaxy. The year was 1945 by the old Earth calendar when Dr. Elena Vasquez detected the first faster-than-light signals from beyond the solar system. The young physicist had been working late in her laboratory in Chile when her experimental quantum receiver picked up what could only be described as screams. The transmission came from the Kepler 442 system, 42 light-years away. Through primitive translation software, humanity listened in horror as an entire civilization died. The Mortaki, a peaceful species of aquatic beings, broadcast their final moments as the Zephyrian hegemony systematically destroyed their cities and enslaved their survivors. Within months, similar signals reached Earth from other systems. The galaxy, it seemed, was full of predators. Species after species fell to various aggressive empires, their final communications serving as grim warnings to anyone listening. The universe was not the place of peaceful exploration that humanity had dreamed it would be. Dr. Marcus Webb had been a young military strategist then, fresh from the academy and full of idealistic plans for humanity's expansion to the stars. The alien transmissions changed everything. In secret meetings with world leaders, a new doctrine was born, the Great Deception. We cannot reveal ourselves, Webb argued to the Emergency Council of World Leaders. If these aggressive species discover Earth, we will be just another conquest. But if we appear weak and primitive, we buy ourselves time. The plan was ambitious beyond imagination. Humanity would develop faster-than-light technology in secret, while maintaining the appearance of a backward civilization. They would build weapons and defenses that could protect Earth, but hide them so well that no alien species would suspect their true capabilities. Dr. Webb became the architect of humanity's greatest magic trick. While the world continued to appear divided and technologically limited, a shadow organization called the Terran Defense Consortium worked in absolute secrecy. Underground facilities were built on every continent. Research stations were hidden in asteroids and on the dark sides of moons. Humanity's brightest minds were recruited into a program that officially did not exist. The breakthrough came in 2015 when Dr. Sarah Chen, then a young quantum physicist, discovered how to manipulate gravitational fields on a massive scale. Her work, based on theoretical frameworks that wouldn't be publicly revealed for another century, made it possible to create localized distortions in space-time itself. "We can fold space," she explained to a room of military officials and scientists, deep beneath the Antarctic ice. "Not just for travel, but for defense. We can create fields that will redirect anything we choose to anywhere we choose." Over the following decades, humanity perfected their deception. When the first alien probe entered the solar system in 2034, it found exactly what Earth wanted it to find: a planet of primitive beings barely capable of spaceflight. The probe detected no advanced technology, no weapons of mass destruction, no hint that humanity was anything more than an emerging civilization, thousands of years behind galactic standards. Meanwhile, the SolNet grew. Gravitational manipulators were positioned throughout the solar system, disguised as asteroids or hidden within planets themselves. Each device was connected to the others through quantum entanglement, creating a web of power that spanned billions of kilometers. But the net was only part of humanity's strategy. Dr. Webb implemented what he called the Garden Protocol. Earth would become a sanctuary not just for humans, but for any peaceful species that faced extinction from galactic predators. The first refugees arrived in 2056. The Veltar, a species of brilliant engineers from the Proxima Centauri system, faced annihilation from the Krex Empire. Humanity staged a false flag operation, making it appear that the Veltar homeworld had been destroyed by a stellar accident. In reality, the entire population was secretly relocated to a hidden colony in the outer solar system. Over 20 years, humanity rescued 17 different species this way. Each time, they made it look like the species had been destroyed or had fled to unknown regions of space. The galactic community never suspected that Earth had become home to the largest refugee population in known space. These rescued species brought knowledge and technology that humanity integrated into the SolNet. The Veltar contributed advanced engineering techniques. The aquatic Mortaki survivors shared their understanding of quantum fields. Each species added to humanity's growing defensive capabilities while remaining officially extinct. Dr. Webb aged with his project, watching as the young physicist Sarah Chen rose through the ranks to become Earth's primary diplomatic representative. She understood better than anyone the delicate balance they maintained, appearing weak enough to be ignored while secretly becoming powerful enough to protect themselves and their allies. The deception wasn't perfect. Several times, aggressive species sent scouts to investigate Earth more closely. Each time, humanity was ready. The scouts would find exactly what they expected: primitive radar installations, simple chemical rockets, and a species that seemed decades away from meaningful space travel. Hidden gravitational fields would subtly encourage the scouts to leave, implanting suggestions that Earth was not worth further investigation. By 2085, 50 years after first contact, the SolNet had become the most sophisticated defensive system ever created. It could manipulate spacetime across the entire solar system, create wormholes on demand, and redirect any object from subatomic particles to entire fleets. But Dr. Webb knew their luck wouldn't last forever. Intelligence gathered from refugee species indicated that the major galactic empires were running out of easy targets. Eventually, someone would turn their attention to the apparently defenseless worlds like Earth. The Zephyrian hegemony had been growing bolder in recent years. Their conquest of the Andromedan colonies had brought them uncomfortably close to human space. Webb's analysts predicted it would be only a matter of time before Admiral Vextar set his sights on Sol system. "Sarah," Webb said to Ambassador Chen during one of their regular briefings, "we always knew this day would come. The question is whether we're ready." Chen nodded gravely. "The net is at full operational capacity. All refugee populations have been moved to secure locations. Our defensive protocols have been tested and retested. And if they don't listen to our warning?" Sarah Chen looked out through the reinforced windows at Earth, spinning slowly below their lunar facility. Somewhere on that blue world, 8 billion humans went about their daily lives, unaware that their survival depended on a secret that had been kept for 80 years. "Then we show them why Earth has remained unconquered," she replied quietly. "We show them what happens when you threaten humanity and its allies." Dr. Webb smiled grimly. The scared young strategist who had first proposed the Great Deception had become an old man, but his resolve had never wavered. Earth would not become another conquered world broadcasting its death screams to an uncaring galaxy. The stage was set. The trap was prepared. All that remained was for someone to be foolish, enough to spring it. The Zephyrian fleet advanced through the solar system like an unstoppable tide of metal and death. Admiral Vextar watched the tactical displays with growing satisfaction as his ships passed Mars and entered the inner system. Everything was proceeding exactly as expected from a primitive species facing inevitable doom. "Contact ahead," announced the sensor operator. "Human defensive fleet approaching from Earth orbit." Vextar leaned forward in his command throne, suddenly interested. "Finally, some resistance. Display them on screen." What appeared before the Zephyrian command crew drew immediate laughter from several officers. 30 human vessels approached, in loose formation, their design clearly decades behind galactic standards. The ships looked like metal tubes with primitive fusion drives armed with what appeared to be simple projectile weapons and basic energy cannons. "That's their entire fleet?" Commander Zethak asked with disbelief. "Our smallest destroyer could handle all of them single-handedly." "Perhaps they hope to ram us," suggested the weapons officer, barely suppressing his amusement. It would be the only way their pathetic ships could possibly cause damage. Vextar studied the approaching human fleet with the eye of an experienced predator. The ships moved awkwardly, their formations sloppy, their approach patterns predictable. These were not the vessels of a species that understood modern warfare. They were the desperate last stand of beings who had never faced real military power. "Open a channel," he ordered. "I want to enjoy their surrender." The face that appeared on screen belonged to a grizzled human male, wearing what looked like a patched military uniform. His name appeared as Admiral Harrison Clark, commanding the Terran Defense Fleet. His expression showed the grim determination of someone who knew he was going to die, but planned to make it cost something. "Zephyrian forces," Clark broadcast, his voice tight with controlled emotion. "This is your final warning. Turn back now, or face the consequences." The bridge erupted in fresh laughter. Even Vextar allowed himself a moment of genuine amusement at the human's audacity. "Admiral Clark," Vextar replied with mock respect, "I appreciate your courage, but surely you can see the futility of your position. 30 obsolete ships against 10,000 modern warships. Surrender now, and I promise, your deaths will be quick." "I'd rather die fighting than live kneeling," Clark responded. "All human ships attack pattern Delta, give them everything we have." The human fleet accelerated toward the Zephyrian armada, their weapons charging with primitive energy signatures. It was by any measure the most hopeless military action Vextar had ever witnessed. "All ships," he broadcast to his fleet, "destroy the human vessels. Make it spectacular. I want this recorded for the archives." The space between the two fleets lit up with weapons fire. Zephyrian particle beams and plasma cannons reached out across millions of kilometers, finding their targets with devastating accuracy. One by one, the human ships exploded in brilliant flashes of light and debris. Admiral Clark's flagship held out longer than the others, its primitive shield somehow absorbing several direct hits before finally succumbing to the overwhelming firepower. The last image transmitted from the human vessel showed Clark himself, bloodied but still standing, raising his fist in defiance before his bridge exploded around him. "Human defensive fleet eliminated," reported the tactical officer with professional satisfaction. "No survivors detected." Vextar nodded approvingly. The humans had died with courage, which was more than could be said for most species he conquered. "Resume course for Earth. Begin bombardment preparations." But something was bothering him. As the debris from the human ships drifted away, Vextar found himself thinking about their attack patterns. For a primitive species, they had maneuvered his entire fleet into a very specific formation. It was almost as if they had been trying to herd his ships into particular positions, rather than actually fighting them. "Commander Zethak," he said slowly, "analyze the human attack patterns. Something feels wrong." Before his second-in-command could respond, the sensor operator called out with alarm in his voice. "Admiral, I'm detecting massive energy buildups throughout the system. Source is unknown, but the readings are off the scale." Vextar spun toward the tactical display. Red warning indicators were appearing everywhere, scattered throughout the asteroid belt, around the outer planets, even on some of the moons they had passed. Energy signatures were spiking to levels that should have been impossible for a primitive civilization. "Where are those readings coming from?" he demanded. "I don't know, sir," the sensor operator replied, his voice tight with confusion. "The energy sources appear to be everywhere, but I can't locate the actual devices generating them. It's like the power is coming from space itself." Deep beneath the surface of Luna, Dr. Marcus Webb watched the Zephyrian fleet's formation on War, his tactical displays with grim satisfaction. After 50 years of planning, the enemy had positioned themselves exactly where the SolNet would be most effective. "All stations report ready," announced his operations officer. "The Zephyrians are in optimal position." Webb looked at the display showing the locations of every hidden gravitational manipulator throughout the solar system. Each one had been disguised, camouflaged, and protected by the best technology humanity and their refugee allies could devise. For decades they had remained invisible to even the most sophisticated sensors. "Sarah did her job perfectly," he murmured, thinking of the brave woman who had delivered humanity's final warning. "And Admiral Clark played his part better than I dared hope." The desperate last stand of the human fleet had been pure theater. Every ship had been unmanned, controlled by advanced AI systems that perfectly mimicked the behavior of doomed but determined crews. The entire battle had been choreographed to convince the Zephyrians that they faced no real threat, while simultaneously maneuvering them into the precise formation needed for Protocol 7. "Sir," called his communications officer, "we're receiving surrender demands from the Zephyrian fleet. They're ordering immediate capitulation of all Earth forces." Webb allowed himself a cold smile. "Open the response channel." Across the void, Admiral Vexistar's confident expression faltered as a new face appeared on his command screen. The elderly human looked nothing like a military officer. He wore simple civilian clothes and sat in what appeared to be a modest office. But his eyes held depths of knowledge and determination that made the alien commander suddenly uncomfortable. "I am Dr. Marcus Webb," the human said calmly. "I speak for Earth and all species under Terran protection. Admiral Vextar, you have violated our quarantine zone, executed our diplomatic representative, and ignored our warnings. The Sol system is under the protection of the Terran Defense Consortium, and you have been found guilty of crimes against peaceful species." "What are you talking about, old man?" Vextar snarled. "Your pathetic fleet is destroyed. Your planet has no defenses. Surrender now or watch your world burn." Webb's expression didn't change. "Admiral, you are not in a position to make threats. Your fleet is currently surrounded by the SolNet, a defensive system that has been 50 years in the making. Every one of your ships is now within our targeting parameters." "Impossible," Vextar shouted. "We detect no weapons, no defensive installations. You're bluffing. The energy readings your sensors are detecting are gravitational field manipulators." Webb explained with the patience of a teacher addressing a slow student. "We can create localized distortions in space-time itself. Your ships, Admiral, are about to experience what we call involuntary relocation." Vextar's tactical officer suddenly called out in panic. "Sir, the energy readings are stabilizing. Whatever they're powering up, it's reaching critical mass." Webb looked directly into the camera, and Vextar saw something in the old human's eyes that made his alien blood run cold. It wasn't anger or hatred. It was the calm, measured look of someone who had made a difficult decision, and was absolutely certain it was the right one. "You should have listened to Ambassador Chen," Webb said quietly. "Some warnings should be heeded." And then, with a gesture so simple it seemed almost casual, Dr. Marcus Webb activated the SolNet. The activation of the SolNet began not with explosive violence but with silence. Across the solar system, gravitational manipulators that had waited in hiding for 50 years synchronized their fields in perfect harmony. The effect was invisible to the naked eye, but sensors throughout the Zephyrian fleet screamed warnings as the very fabric of space began to bend. Admiral Vextar felt it first as a strange sensation in his inner ears, a pressure that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. The bridge lights of the Eternal Dominion flickered as gravitational waves passed through the massive dreadnought like ripples through water. "Report!" he shouted over the growing alarm sirens. His sensor operator's voice cracked with panic. "Admiral, gravitational readings are impossible. Space-time distortion detected in a sphere encompassing our entire fleet. The readings they're off any scale, I understand." On the main tactical display, the neat formation of 10,000 Zephyrian warships began to appear strangely stretched, as if viewed through warped glass. The stars themselves seemed to bend around the fleet, creating visual distortions that hurt to look at directly. Commander Zethak gripped his station as the ship shuddered. "Sir, whatever they're doing, it's affecting our navigation systems. Our position readings are fluctuating wildly." Vextar spun toward the communication screen, where Dr. Webb still sat calmly in his modest office. The old human watched the chaos with the detached interest of a scientist observing an experiment. "Stop this," Vextar roared. "What are you doing to my ships?" Webb's reply was conversational, almost educational. "We're relocating your fleet, Admiral. The SolNet creates controlled wormholes through folded spacetime. Think of it as forced transportation. Your ships will remain intact, but their location will change dramatically. The gravitational fields intensified. Throughout the Zephyrian fleet, crews struggled to understand what was happening as their instruments registered readings that defied everything they knew about physics. Ships that had been separated by thousands of kilometers suddenly appeared to be occupying the same space, while others seemed to stretch across light years. On the bridge of a Zephyrian destroyer, Captain Mordek watched in horror as a nearby cruiser seemed to fold in on itself like paper, not destroyed but compressed into impossible geometric shapes. His own ship felt like it was falling, though his artificial gravity remained perfectly normal. "Engineering," he called desperately. "Can we break free?" The response came back laden with terror. "Captain, our engines are responding normally, but we're not moving through normal space anymore. Whatever field we're caught in, it's carrying us along regardless of our thrust." Across the fleet, similar reports flooded communication channels. The Zephyrian Empire's most advanced warships, vessels capable of crossing galaxies and reducing planets to ash, found themselves as helpless as leaves in a hurricane. Dr. Webb continued his calm explanation, as if discussing the weather. "The beauty of gravitational manipulation, Admiral, is that it works on everything equally. Your shields, your weapons, your engines, none of them can affect gravitational fields of this magnitude. You are, quite literally, passengers now." Vextar's forearms trembled with rage and growing fear. "Where are you sending us?" "Approximately 53,000 light-years from here," Webb replied matter-of-factly. "The Galactic Rim, where space is empty and cold. Your ships will arrive intact but without sufficient fuel or supplies to return. Consider it a very long exile." The space around the Zephyrian fleet began to collapse inward, not physically but dimensionally. Reality folded like origami as the SolNet created a controlled wormhole large enough to encompass 10,000 warships simultaneously. The stars outside the fleet's viewports stretched into lines of light, then spiraled into patterns that hurt to perceive. In his final moments in normal space, Admiral Vextar understood with crystal clarity that he had made the greatest mistake in Zephyrian military history. The humans hadn't been primitive at all. They had been patient, preparing for exactly this scenario with the kind of long-term thinking his species had never mastered. "You planned this from the beginning," he said, his voice hollow with defeated realization. "The pathetic diplomatic mission, the hopeless fleet engagement, it was all to position us exactly where you needed us." Webb nodded gravely. "Ambassador, Chen bought us the time we needed to get your ships in optimal formation. Admiral Clark's sacrifice ensured you would be grouped closely enough for maximum efficiency. Every human who died today knew they were saving billions of lives throughout the galaxy." The wormhole completed its formation. From the outside, observers would later describe it as watching 10,000 ships simply cease to exist, vanishing in an instant without explosion or debris. One moment, the largest invasion fleet in galactic history dominated the space near Earth. The next moment, there was nothing but empty vacuum and drifting cosmic dust. 53,000 light-years away, at the very edge of the galaxy where space was dark and cold, 10,000 Zephyrian warships suddenly materialized in a flash of twisted light. The transition was jarring but not destructive. Hull integrity remained intact, life support continued functioning, and weapon systems remained operational, but they were alone in the deepest darkness between galaxies, with only each other for company and no way home. Admiral Vextar stood on his bridge, looking out at stars so distant they appeared as mere pinpricks of light. The Milky Way galaxy itself was nothing more than a spiral smudge on the cosmic horizon, impossibly far away. "Status report," he said quietly. Commander Zithak consulted his instruments with shaking hands. "All ships report successful transition, Admiral. Casualties are minimal. However," his voice faltered. "Continue. Our fuel reserves are sufficient for perhaps 6 months of normal operations. Communication with the hegemony is impossible across this distance. And Admiral," Zithak's voice dropped to a whisper, "at maximum speed it would take us over 2 million years to reach the nearest galaxy." The silence that followed was broken only by the soft hum of life support systems. 10,000 ships full of the galaxy's most feared warriors, stranded in the void with no hope of return. Meanwhile, in the Sol system, automated systems began broadcasting across every known communication frequency in the galaxy. The message was simple: but its implications would reshape galactic civilization forever. Dr. Webb's image appeared on screens throughout hundreds of star systems, his elderly face calm and authoritative. Behind him, the blue marble of Earth rotated, peacefully, no longer hiding its true nature. To all civilizations receiving this transmission, he began. This is Dr. Marcus Webb of the Terran Defense Consortium. Today the Zephyrian hegemony's invasion fleet violated the Sol System quarantine zone and was removed from our local space group using defensive technologies we have developed over the past 50 years. The broadcast continued with detailed sensor records of the entire engagement, showing the effortless elimination of what had been considered the galaxy's most powerful military force. Let this serve as notice to all aggressive species. Earth is not defenseless, and we will not tolerate acts of war against peaceful civilizations. The Sol System remains under quarantine. Any further violations will result in similar consequences. Across the galaxy, in the command centers of a dozen aggressive empires, military leaders watched the broadcast with growing horror. The impossible had happened. The primitive humans of Earth had just made the galaxy's most feared admiral, and his entire fleet simply disappear. The age of easy conquest was over. A new power had revealed itself, and it was not interested in building an empire. It was interested in something far more dangerous to warlike species, enforcing peace. 6 months after the Zephyrian fleet vanished from the solar system, the galaxy had become a very different place. Ambassador Sarah Chen stood in the newly constructed Terran embassy, a massive space station positioned at the edge of Earth's orbit. Through the observation deck's transparent aluminum windows, she could see a sight that would have been impossible just a year ago. Diplomatic vessels from dozens of alien species, waiting patiently in organized traffic lanes for their turn to meet with human representatives. Ambassador, called her aide, Lieutenant Commander James Park, the Krex delegation has arrived. They're requesting immediate audience regarding their formal surrender. Sarah nodded, straightening her diplomatic uniform. The Krex Empire had been one of the galaxy's most aggressive civilizations, responsible for the destruction of at least 6 peaceful species over the past century. Now their emperor himself waited in the embassy's reception area, hat in hand, and trembling with fear. Show them to conference room 1, she instructed, and remind them that this is a discussion of terms, not a negotiation. As Park left to escort the alien delegation, Sarah reflected on how quickly everything had changed. The broadcast of the Zephyrian fleet's disappearance had spread across the galaxy faster than any news in recorded history. Within days, every major power had received detailed sensor logs showing exactly how effortlessly Earth had eliminated 10,000 warships. The first response had been disbelief. The Rigelian Combine had sent probe ships to verify the humans' claims. They found the Sol system exactly as described, protected by gravitational field generators of impossible sophistication, defended by technologies that made their own weapons look like stone tools. The second response had been fear. If humanity could make the legendary Zephyrian fleet simply vanish, what could they do to smaller, less powerful civilizations? The third response had been surrender. Emperor Vashtok of the Krex Empire entered the conference room, flanked by his most trusted advisors, all of them displaying the submissive postures of defeated beings. The Krex were reptilian in appearance, with scaled hides that normally displayed aggressive coloration during military campaigns. Today, their scales showed the muted gray of complete submission. Ambassador Chen, Vashtok began, his voice carefully respectful. The Krex Empire formally requests terms for our surrender to Terran authority. Sarah studied the alien emperor with calm professionalism. Intelligence reports indicated that this being had personally ordered the orbital bombardment of 3 inhabited worlds. Billions had died on his command. The Terran Defense Consortium does not seek to rule other species, Emperor, she replied evenly. We seek only to ensure that aggressive civilizations cease their campaigns of conquest and destruction. What would you require of us? One of Vashtok's advisors asked nervously. Sarah activated a holographic display showing the Krex Empire's territory. Red indicators marked worlds that had been conquered or destroyed in recent decades. First, immediate cessation of all military campaigns against peaceful species. Second, reparations to surviving populations of worlds you have attacked. Third, submission to monitoring by Terran observers to ensure compliance. Emperor Vashtok's scaled hide flushed with colors of humiliation, but he nodded agreement. And if we comply with these terms, then you will be allowed to continue governing your original territories under Terran protection, Sarah answered. We are not conquerors, Emperor. We are peacekeepers. As the Krex delegation was escorted out to sign formal documents, Sarah's thoughts turned to the dozens of similar meetings she had conducted over recent months. The Andromedans had surrendered after a 2-hour deliberation. The Centauri Federation had actually volunteered to assist in hunting down remaining aggressive factions. Even the infamous Voidstalkers, pirates who had terrorized shipping lanes for generations, had agreed to reformed behavior in exchange for amnesty. Her contemplation was interrupted by Lieutenant Commander Park. "Ma'am, priority message from Dr. Webb on Luna. He says it's urgent." Sarah took the encrypted call in her private office. Webb's image appeared on screen and she was surprised to see him smiling, a rare expression for the elderly architect of Earth's defense. "Sarah," he said without preamble, "we've just received a very interesting transmission. You need to see this." The screen shifted to show a grainy, long-distance communication signal. The image quality was poor, but Sarah could make out the interior of what looked like a Zephyrian command bridge. A figure in the distinctive uniform of Admiral Vextar appeared on screen. "This is Admiral Vextar of the Zephyrian hegemony." The transmission began, his voice carrying none of its former arrogance. "To any hegemony forces receiving this message, I am transmitting from coordinates that place us approximately 53,000 light-years from our previous position. The human species possesses military capabilities far beyond anything in our tactical databases." The transmission quality improved slightly, and Sarah could see the exhaustion in the alien commander's features. "All hegemony forces are ordered to avoid the Sol system and any territories claimed by the Terran species. Do not underestimate them as we did. They are not primitive. They are not weak. They are the most dangerous military force this galaxy has ever seen." Vexter paused, and when he continued, his voice carried the weight of absolute defeat. "The fleet under my command has sufficient supplies for approximately 6 months. We will attempt to establish a colony in this region of space, but our chances of survival are minimal. Let our fate serve as a warning to any who would threaten Earth or its allies." The transmission ended in static. Webb reappeared on screen. "That signal has been broadcasting for the past 3 weeks. It's reached every major hegemony base in the galaxy. Combined with our own diplomatic efforts, I believe we've achieved something remarkable, Sarah." "What's that, Marcus?" "Peace," the old man replied simply. "For the first time in recorded galactic history, there are no major interstellar wars being fought. Every aggressive species has either surrendered to our oversight or gone into hiding." Sarah felt a mixture of pride and sadness. The cost of that peace had been enormous, not just in the resources spent developing the Solnet, but in the lives lost maintaining the deception for so many decades. "What about the refugee species we've been protecting?" she asked. Webb's smile widened. "That's the best part. We're finally able to reveal them to the galaxy. The Veltar delegation is preparing to reclaim their homeworld system. The Mortaki have been in contact with survivors we didn't even know existed. 17 species that the galaxy thought were extinct are about to return to public existence." Over the following weeks, the true scope of humanity's long-term strategy became clear to the galactic community. Earth had not just been protecting itself, but had been serving as a sanctuary for every peaceful species that faced extinction from aggressive neighbors. The revelation changed everything. Humanity wasn't just a military power that had to be feared. They were protectors who had saved species after species from genocide. Dr. Webb stood in his lunar facility, now openly acknowledged as the headquarters of the Terran Defense Consortium. The same displays that had once shown the approaching Zephyrian fleet now tracked peaceful trade routes and diplomatic missions throughout the galaxy. "Status report," he said to his operations staff. "All monitoring stations report normal activity." His aide replied, "No aggressive fleet movements detected anywhere in our surveillance network. The Rigelian Combine completed their reparation payments to the survivors of Kepler 438b yesterday. The former hegemony territories are transitioning to local governance under our oversight." Webb nodded with satisfaction. "And our special projects?" "Protocol, Omega remains on standby," the aide answered. "The galaxy-wide version of the Solnet could be operational within 72 hours if needed." The old man allowed himself a moment of quiet pride. Humanity had achieved something that many thought impossible. They had brought peace to the galaxy not through conquest, but through the credible threat of consequences for aggression. In the deep void between galaxies, Admiral Vextar watched. His fleet's supply levels dropped toward critical levels. They had managed to establish a small mining operation on a rogue planet, extracting just enough resources to keep life support functioning. It would not be enough for long, but his final message had been received. Across the galaxy, aggressive species had learned what happened when you dismissed Earth's warnings. Some threats he had learned too late should always be taken seriously. The galaxy was at peace, protected by a species that appeared weak but commanded powers beyond imagination. And somewhere in the darkness between stars, 10,000 ships served as a permanent reminder that some lines should never be crossed.